let's make some paper flowers. These colorful, fun decorations or accessories or gifts to give are really easy to make. They're made out of a common material that you probably have around the house. They're made out of tissue paper. They can also be made out of other lightweight papers. And they're just really fun and really easy to make. So here I have some assortment of shapes and sizes to show you how flexible this technique can be. And they're sort of all different, but all the same. And I'm going to first show you the basic process and then explain how to get some of those variations. What you'll need is some tissue paper. These are half of a larger sheet, so I cut down lengthwise. You want a shape, you want all of your layers to be the same dimensions. You want them to be sort of longer than they are wide. The specific proportions don't matter a whole lot, but so there's a lot of range, and I'll show you sort of some tricks for how to know if your size will work. But basically, this is the most forgiving way to make a thing that looks like a flower that's made out of paper. And that is why I love this process so much, because I love processes that are forgiving and flexible and leave lots of space for experimentation. What you'll need is tissue paper, a pair of scissors, or something else you can cut the paper with, and then maybe you have string or kitchen twine or an old twisty tie. Maybe you have green pipe cleaners, or if you're a crafty person, you might have a wire floral stem. Any of that will work to hold your flower together. So the basic process is to stack your layers up. Make sure that they're all lined up-ish. You can see here, I've got some layers here that aren't quite the same dimension. Totally fine. Lines aren't straight. They don't exactly line up here on the end. None of this matters. You just want them roughly the same size, same shape, and stacked into a pile as well as you can get them. So if your tissue paper is crinkled from previous use, totally fine. Smooth it out as well as you can and just go for it. I promise, it's really, really forgiving. The first step, the thing that lays the foundation for your flower, is an accordion fold. We're going to orient it so that we're folding the shorter edge. And with this paper, because it is so much longer than it is wide, I'm going to make my folds about 1 inch, working on this lovely 1-inch grid here. So I'm going to fold up about 1 inch. I'm going to flip the paper back toward me and just try to keep your folds as you're going parallel. And I'm just flinging it back and forth. You could try to flip it around different ways, but once you have that first fold, it'll all stay in place. So you can kind of just fling it around however you need to. So as I'm folding, I'm just trying to match up my new crease with the ones before, keep them relatively in line with each other. If you are working on a cutting mat or other work surface with a grid on it, you can use the grid as a guide. I'm not really using the grid, I'm just eyeballing it. Go back and forth, and back and forth. The nice thing about this process, it's not slow, it's pretty satisfying. You see progress pretty quickly, but each of these sort of steps or phases in making the flower can be sort of meditative, let you really focus on just the position of your hands, the arrangement of the paper, the thing I like about paper crafting is the way that it engages a lot of your senses. You've got your hands, your eyes. This sort of flipping motion engages your core a little bit. Paper crafting as a workout here, not really. You'll notice too, as I'm going, that I'm not doing a great job of keeping it super straight and upright in a stack. My ends are not all the way lined up, and I am not worried about this at all. This is not a problem. And I will show you why in just a moment. Okay, so I have a reasonable stack. It's all folded up. This stack, I should have said earlier, is, I think I have 7 or 8 layers. 7. Probably would recommend at least 4 layers, but you can do more, you can do less. Show you sort of some examples here to give you an idea. So the next step, we're gonna bind this together. But the next decision, or the decision that you have to make, is the shape of your petals. So I have these 2 flowers are made from identical stacks of paper, from identical size of paper, and this one has a rounded petal, and this one has a pointed petal. So you can see they're a similar level of like density or openness, but this one has a softer sort of feel to it, and this one's more like spiky and spiky. And then this flower is made from a smaller sheet of paper, but twice as many layers as these. And you can see how all of the layers are closer together. You don't see as far into the interior of the flower because of the density of the layers. So this flower that I'm making here will be more like this one, but bigger. Sort of along the lines of like this guy, which it's been around for a while. It's kind of showing its age, but has a lot of layers. So just to give you an idea of the different styles we can get from trimming our petals. But the first thing we want to do before we cut is actually bind our stack. So I'm going to kind of fold it in half. Again, we're going to trim this, so it's not going to be exact, but just to give me a sense of where the middle is. And I'm going to use string for this one. I like to cut it a little bit longer than I'm going to need so that I have sort of a handle to hold on to for the next step. And whatever side, you won't see the string. I'm using this red and white striped string. My flower is orange and blue. It doesn't matter because you're not going to see the string at all. That's why you can use just a twisty tie or whatever random, a piece of ribbon, something that is a crazy color or doesn't look like a flower stem at all. Totally fine. Just tied a simple knot here, and the orange will be the underside of my flower, and the blue, this like light blue, will be the inside of my flower. So at this stage, one thing I wanted to share is that hopefully your flower pretty easily lets you do this, create a whole circle from your straight accordion. If I had made my folds taller or my paper was longer, that might not be as easy to do. So if you get to the point where, if you get to this point, or before you tie it, and you can't easily bring your sides together, the easiest thing to do is go back and make your stack narrower, shorter. So you would fold at more like 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch. And you don't have to get new paper or anything, you can just refold it. And that way you get enough give from those folds to make a full circle. Otherwise you end up making, this one ended up sort of like that, where you can see the seam easily. It's still beautiful, but it's more of a bow tie than a flower. Okay, so hopefully you have something that right now looks like a zigzaggy butterfly thing. You've picked your colors and your layers, and I'm going to go ahead and make my petals sharp, as I'm liking that effect right now. And because I have so many layers of paper, it's going to be difficult to cut this in a nice way, but my scissors are reasonably sharp. I'm just going to hack at it. The thing you want to make sure is that you cut past all of those uneven ends. So I don't know how well you'll be able to see this in the video, but my orange papers end here. So I need my point to end around there. Otherwise those petals won't look pointed. So I'm cutting off all of those uneven ends so that everything lines up. I'm just going to see if I can get this side. There we go. So now it's a relatively even triangle point there. And then on this other side, in order to get the sides to be symmetrical, I'm going to have to cut off a similar amount. So I'm just checking to make sure that they'll stay even. I'm going to kind of mark that with my scissors. And then see if I can cut through this. So what I'm doing here to get through these layers is cutting just a few at a time and just kind of making it work. Again, the thing that is wonderful about this process is that it's super forgiving, super flexible. The more layers you have, the harder it is to see anything that might go wrong. So if your paper tears, your points aren't exactly symmetrical, starting with six or 7 or 8 layers means that won't matter at all. Looks like my string is not quite middle anymore. There we go. Okay, so the second meditative part of this process is pulling up your layers of your flower. What you'll want to do, find it easiest to hold it by that string from the bottom and manipulate one layer at a time. And see, I'm spreading out the fan, working my hands, my fingers in between the layers, and see, pulling it up gently. And for the first few layers, you want to make sure you get all the way to the middle. After the first layer or two, it doesn't matter as much. You won't be able to. But pulling that first layer up all the way means that you're less likely to see your string or your twist tie or whatever. I like to do the same layer all the way around before I move on to the next layer, rather than working one side at a time. So it just gives me an idea of what the flower is going to look like as I go. If your paper tears, totally fine. You won't notice. If, that's the most common thing that happens. Say I pull too hard, have this big piece, I'm just gonna pull it all the way off and keep going, because as I pull up the next layer, you won't even be able to see. If there's a big piece hanging off, that's obviously, but pull it off and no one will ever know. So I'll just do maybe 1 or 2 more layers, because while this is nice and meditative to do on your own at home, it's maybe not the most riveting video content. But just gently, 1 layer at a time, spreading out the fan, working my fingers underneath, pulling up the layers as much as I can without ripping them, but not worrying too much if they do rip, because no one will notice. I don't think I could even find where I ripped that big chunk off. You can't tell at all. Let's get this blue layer up on this side. One of the possibilities for getting your flowers to look different from each other too is to just leave some layers not pulled up. You get sort of like a daffodil effect with the textured area in the middle and a different texture around the edge, just like this, which is really fun. You can also, if you're not interested in making flowers, you could pull these layers the other way and make more of a puff ball than a flower. But the thing I love about this style, or this way of making them, is they're so lightweight at the end that just a piece of masking tape on this string will let you have really beautiful wall decor. You can put them wherever you want. It won't damage your paint. The other thing I love to do with them, and I'll post this video as a blog post on my website, which is yeiou.com. And I'll show some pictures of different things I've done with these. But my other favorite thing is to add a piece of elastic or use an existing headband and wear them as like a hat or a fun fascinator sort of thing on your head, especially the big ones. It's really, really fun. Okay, so that's your basic paper flower. You can get some fun effects by pulling up some of the layers and not all of them. And now I'm going to show you some other options for making different styles of flowers. Okay, so we've made some basic paper flowers here, and now I'm going to show you my favorite sort of variation on this. And for this, what we're going to need is some larger pieces of tissue paper and some narrower pieces of tissue paper. I think I have 4 pieces here. 4 wider pieces, and this piece is the same style or same size of piece but folded in half lengthwise. And I'm not going to worry about this folded edge here. Again, the beauty of this project is that you want your pieces of paper to be roughly the same size or shape and dimension, but they don't have to be exact. Like, my corners don't line up. This one's got a funny wrinkle in it. This piece has a crease all the way down it. None of this is a problem. So the way to begin again is to start by doing your accordion fold. And just, this is the edge I'm going to start folding on. That's why I was trying to get it a little better lined up. And again, I do a little bit less than an inch this time. This paper is a little bit shorter than the one I was making before. I want to make sure again that we get that full circle so that my flower looks like a flower, not a butterfly. And I'm folding back and forth, trying to keep my folds stacked. So the reason we have this piece in the middle that's narrower is we're going to create a fluffier center and have our actual petals, have sort of petals arrayed around the center that are longer and floppier. But everything needs to fold together so that we make one flower and not two separate ones. So first we fold it all together like this. Call that good enough. You can always trim this extra if you want. I'm not going to bother. So with this one, instead of going straight into assembly, I'm actually going to take this narrower piece out and do the petal trimming step separately. Again, I find my middle-ish and we're just gonna cut a little rounded sort of petal bump here. I'm more concerned about it being mostly symmetrical than about the specific shape, because again, once you're pulling it up like this, no one's really going to notice. Okay, so this is my center of my flower, and then these will be my outer petals. Again, let's find our middle. And because this has twice as many pieces of paper as this, I'm not going to try to cut it, fold it in half. With this one, in order to create a floppier petal, I'm going to start cutting, this is my middle, I'm going to start cutting about halfway and just sort of skim along the side of my petals. You just want to cut through that fold so that you open them up. And rather than trying to awkwardly like go from the other side, I'm just going to flip it over so that my paper is in the place I need it to be. My cut started here. I'm going to try to keep it even across. And I'm just checking to make sure I missed some here. Just want to cut through that fold, all the layers so that they're opened up. So if I unfold it, it's sort of a fringe. I can check. Missed a layer here. I'm just going to rip it. So forgiving. Fold it back up and come over to the other side. Again, here's my middle point. I'm going to start from about halfway. Just cut straight down the side. Make sure they're open. Try to line up my cuts across. You can also round the ends of your petals. You know, just leave mine flat because I think that'll be a little bit more sort of sunflowery. Open it up and check. You want your cuts to be roughly the same depth. I'm missing some. And the reason that these didn't all get cut is because my original accordion wasn't as even as it could be. So if I had folded that more accurately, it would be less fiddly now, but it's not a big deal. Okay. I can also, if I realize as I'm going that I missed some of those, once I start pulling up my layers, I can fix it then too. Don't have to do it all right now. I'm going to open it back up and open up my middle. And then put my middle back into the accordion. Make sure that they all line up. Make sure that it's in the middle, centered this way. And then get my string, just like the last one. And so when I'm tying my string, I'm going to make sure that this side with that my middle shorter layers is visible is going to be my top. So I'm going to make sure that my knot is on the other side, the underside of the flower. And again, we want to center the string this way so that our flower is symmetrical. Okay, so let's check. It's a little late to check, but let's check and make sure. Looks like we're gonna have a full circle without any problems. And then I'm gonna be really careful as I pull up these center layers because there's only 2 layers. And I know that I'm already ripping that layer. It's harder to pull up a shorter layer. So this really short layer here is basically just going to cover the string for me. Wish I'd left it maybe a little bit longer or started with a wider piece of paper. So that I would get a little bit more of a fluffy middle there, but it's going to work just fine. There's one side. There's the other side. I'm going to pull up that second layer. And again, if it rips, it's okay. If you tear off a piece entirely, not a problem. It's just slow and steady. You can see here I'm going to have some pieces to cut. Those petals didn't get fully separated. I'll post some pictures on my blog with this video of some other flowers I've made in this style, where I was able to do a yellow center and white petals, so it looks sort of like a daisy. I really liked those. That one, or those ones, I made really large. I used the full sheet of the tissue paper. The tissue paper I have is as big as this cutting mat, maybe a little bit bigger. And so the flowers end up being about that big, which is really fun. Okay, so now I'm going to go back in and cut through some of these layers that didn't get cut all the way before. So I have a bunch of individual petals. I guess I didn't do a very good job of that step. Hopefully it went better for you. Okay, you could totally leave it like this. It's super fun. It has some good movement to it. I'm gonna start pulling up these layers though and see what happens. So with these, because your petals are longer and a little more fragile, I'm being careful to work my fingers right up into the base and make sure I'm not pulling just on a single petal, but I'm pulling on the larger sheet as much as I can. So there's the first layer on half of it. Or not quite half. Here we go. So I'm using my bottom hand to help spread the accordion apart. and then my top hand works down between the layers so that I can hopefully find something with some structure before I pull up so that less of it tears. So there's the first layer. Go ahead and do pink underneath. These flowers, this style I found doesn't wear as well, doesn't weather as well. These other more dense types of flowers, some of these I've had for probably a year at least, and I'm able to just toss them around. I keep them up on a shelf in my studio. I don't even protect them from dust. And they still look pretty cool. I had one of my bigger ones taped to the wall in my living room for also about a year, just with a piece of masking tape again, because they're so lightweight. And it makes for a nice dimensional, movable, textural addition to like a collage wall. Or really anywhere. So at this point, honestly, I'm a little bit lost. You don't have to go all the way around. You can just pull up your layers as you find layers. Again, I'm gonna use my string as an anchor, and that lets me pull up on layer, or pull layers up without necessarily having a solid layer below to push against. So just fluffing until it feels fluffy enough, basically. And you can see it has this nice dense center and these fun outer petals that you get a lot more movement because they're flippy floppy. So that is tissue paper flowers, 2 ways, but also sort of infinite ways. I hope you feel like you have the skills, the tools that you need to go forth and make cool, puffy things out of tissue paper. Thanks for watching.